Hiya, and welcome back to No More Future. The game that teaches us that Jasper is willing to be civil, but only in public. Anyways, let's just hop right in. Apologies for the wait, good guests. You and Jasper both are brought back to Earth by the sudden arrival of the same waiter from earlier, accompanied by two valets holding some scarcely furnished plates. For our first hors d'oeuvre, we have air of plankton and cocoa beans on a bed of river trout and potato scales. Have a good meal. Air of plankton. It is only after the skunk and his fellow waiters have left you that you allow yourself to chuckle at the plate before you, earning a soft giggle even from the man before you. Ironic. Ironic indeed. I hope this doesn't mean they heard me. I assure you, they didn't. Had your tone of voice ever gotten that high, I would have silenced you myself. Well, that's reassuring. And a little frightening. You take a brief look into your plate, if you can even call it that. You're not sure if you can even see the trout hidden underneath what looks like sea foam, but a meal is a meal, you suppose, especially if Jasper's paying for it. When you finally get to it, the taste is about as ethereal as you originally expected. It tastes like nothing. So you claim. I'm actually rather enjoying myself. He's certainly not displeased, that's for sure. But for the matter, neither are you, considering there was barely anything in it to be displeased with. Having said that, I'm surprised you can even taste anything at all. Of all the things Dr. Shelley could have developed before means of establishing your humanity or lack thereof, a sense of taste must have been at the bottom of the list. And yet I have one. I can also feel pain for that matter, as well as go to sleep when I'm feeling drained. That sounds entirely unnecessary. Yeah, I guess you're right about that. But imagine how you'd feel if you were suddenly deprived of all these things at once. I'm pretty sure anyone who finds themselves in such a situation would be quick to go insane. The Drake is as intrigued by your argument as he is repelled by it. In an effort to not lose his mind, he decides to change the subject onto something else that you just said. Oh my god, I can't speak. You say so, and yet I doubt you'll find anyone in the world who lives every day in pain and agony who won't get rid of that sensation in a heartbeat, given the opportunity. If you can choose whether to feel pain or not, as I assume you do, and you still choose to suffer, then you are a fool. You can't say you don't see the truth in the dragon's words, as rude as they are. It's definitely a fair perspective on this matter, if nothing else. But you have your own perspective you wish to share. Do you have any idea of how it feels to lose everything all at once? To go to sleep not knowing if you'll ever get to wake up again? Your choice of topic has successfully unnerved the unpleasant Drake, though whether that was your intended goal or not is debatable. Nonetheless, with all these dark thoughts swarming your mind at present, beckoned by your dreadful memories, the only thing you can do is voice them out loud before they overtake you from within. I know what it's like to feel nothing now, and that has taught me how important it is to feel anything. Hunger, fatigue, pain, sure they're inconvenient. They've always been inconvenient, but that doesn't make them any less important. Maybe you're right, and I might be better off without them. But I think I'd rather keep them for now, if only so I can remember what it's like to live and breathe. You ought to thank Apollo for helping you come to terms with your feelings on the matter. If it wasn't for that discussion you had with him and his sister a few days back, you don't know what you'd be thinking right now. Again, the dragon's gaze veers off into the unknown, his expression a mixture of uncertainty, fear, and anger. The only thing you can gather is that he's been listening intently to everything you said. Not quite the conversation you were looking forward to, I assume. Indeed. Frankly speaking, this sort of sentimental talk is outside the scope of our meeting here. We didn't come to this place to discuss trivial things such as these, nor are we here to waste time and idle about. We're here to absolve a purpose, as you well remember yourself. As calm and serious as Jasper purports himself to be, you can notice a distinct feeling of discomfort hidden behind his austere facade, of hurt even. But there's no point inquiring about it at this point, you reckon. He'd probably just deny it and start yelling at you again. I understand. Good. So let us return to what we should really be discussing, shall we? You're referring to our talk from earlier in the car, right? About your company and stuff? Indeed. We never quite finished that conversation, did we? I'm pretty sure we didn't, no. I think the last thing we spoke about was whether Pandora classified as a family business or not. You know, on account of your family being pretty much responsible for it existing in the first place and stuff. The Drake raises an eyebrow at your observation, though to what end you cannot say. Well, I certainly wouldn't call it that myself, if I could avoid it, but it is true that my family has been in charge of Pandora's management and upkeep across the ages. Now it's your turn to squint at Jasper's affirmation. Across the ages? How old is Pandora again? Well, it's a little difficult to pinpoint exactly due to its murky origins. But the nucleus of what will later become Pandora was laid out as early as the late 18th century. The 18th? That's almost 300 years ago. That's quite the story to history for an R&D firm. Again, Jasper gives you a weird sort of look, as though he genuinely cannot tell whether you're jesting or not. I'm referring to Pandora Incorporated, not the labs. Those have only been around for half as long, give or take. Oh, that's right. I keep forgetting that they're two separate entities. Hiya. Yeah. You're 22X? That's quite difficult to believe. You mean to tell me you truly cannot distinguish between the two? They are quite different after all. I think so? From what I gathered earlier at the meeting, all Pandora Inc. does is provide the funding for the labs to function, correct? The Drake almost facepalms at your assertion. That woman truly told you nothing, did she? You raise an eyebrow at his comment, though thankfully a deeper explanation is not too far behind. The labs belong to the Pandora holding, yes, but claiming that all Pandora does is provide funding to other businesses is hardly a comprehensive answer. What does that even mean? The conversation has become so technical in nature, you're honestly starting to feel a little left out. So, what does Pandora Inc. actually do again? Everything. The answer is so quick and sudden it almost takes you aback. You mean that it's involved in a lot of different markets, or... The Drake needs quite some time to sort through his thoughts, and you can't say that makes you any less disconcerted. Even that isn't a complete answer. And what is the complete answer exactly? That Pandora has stakes in numerous businesses and holdings across the entire economic spectrum. Is Pandora just the modern-day Samsung? And how is that any different from what I just said? Jasper gives you a foul look, unamused by your rude interruption. These businesses and holdings also have stakes in numerous other businesses and holdings, and so do these latter groups, and so on and so forth. Do you understand where I'm going with this? Not really? Then I'll lay it in terms even you can understand. Through its numerous holdings and business ventures, Pandora Inc. owns everything. Every business in every sector in every market in every country. Well, almost everything, but the point still stands. You mean even this restaurant? You give a brief look at your surroundings once again, who all of a sudden shine in a completely different light than they did earlier. Of course, and rest assured, the waiters here know this very well, whether they're fully aware of it or not. Why else do you suppose they had so little trouble vacating the entire restaurant for our arrival? It was done solely to accommodate you, after all, and you coming along was decided at the last minute. That makes a staggering amount of sense, actually. You were wondering how come the entire restaurant was empty save for the two of you. Regardless, this doesn't make what you're hearing any less unreal. Restaurants and eateries are but a small part of our ventures, and yet we control nearly all of them nonetheless. Even further beyond those, if you can name a company or an enterprise, it's more likely than not that we are behind it. So you're like a monopoly. The dragon scoffs at your comment as though you've still yet to grasp what he's trying to tell you. A monopoly is a business that controls the entirety of a specific market, android. And like I said, that's not an apt descriptor for what we are. Pandora isn't a business. It's not even a market. It's the entire world economy. They are the modern day Samsung. Just as Jasper finishes his sentence, the waiters bring the next appetizer. Poached clams. Something something. You honestly didn't listen. You haven't even deemed your plate a glance. All you can do is stare, flabbergasted at the Drake before you, eating his meal intently as though he didn't just say the craziest thing you've ever heard, possibly in your entire life. You're pulling my leg, right? I mean, there's no way we're having this conversation now of all times. In the middle of a restaurant where other people might hear us. And yet we are having this conversation right here, in the middle of this locale, where other people might hear us. Jasper is built different. What few people are around anyway. You briefly glance at the nearby tables, prompted by the CEO. Even now, they're still empty. When you first saw them upon entering the locale, you merely found it shocking. Now, it's more so unsettling. And you're fine telling me all this in spite of that? Aren't you afraid of those waiters learning all about how you're the world economy or whatever? Last you heard, deep conspiracies like that only thrive because nobody's aware of them even existing. Or at least, that's what you assume. You honestly haven't watched nearly enough movies to have an opinion on this kind of stuff. Not really, no. Whether people are aware of what I'm telling you or not is entirely irrelevant. You being aware of it, on the other hand, is of the utmost importance at present. Me? What does me being aware of all this have anything to do with why we're here? I thought you were supposed to ask me questions and stuff, to get a better idea of whether I'm human or not, like the owners asked. The dragon covers his face as he shakes his head, evidently disappointed, mouthing foul words under his breath you can only catch a hint of. And pray tell, how am I supposed to gain insight into your situation when you're clearly unaware of it in the first place? You're instantly taken aback by Jasper's sudden report. So cold and to the point it is. If there's someone who needs to learn here, it is none other than you. You didn't know the law surrounding synthetics when I first met you. You didn't know of the FBI's meddling in the project until they showed up in your apartment. And just now, I found out that you didn't even know the full scope of the company that created you in the first place. You can't bring yourself to reply to a single one of these accusations. You, more than anyone else, know that you're guilty as charged. Honestly, you should feel happy that I'm taking time out of my day to educate you on this matter, assuming you can even feel happy in the first place. After all, it's not like Dr. Shelley ever told you about any of this before. Did she? No. No, she didn't. Well, if anything, her not saying anything just makes all this even more implausible. I mean, there's no way you guys got this big and did all this with nobody noticing. Oh, don't make me laugh. Do you really think this is all some sort of big conspiracy? As I stated earlier, Pandora acquired its leading position in the world economy through perfectly legal fusions and acquisitions. All done in broad daylight, no less. I assure you, people had every opportunity to take notice of what was happening. You cannot tell whether the Drake's voice has any particular intonation. So lost you are trying to wrap your head around everything he's saying. And you're saying nobody ever realized that Pandora owned every single business they ever bought goods or services from? Did you? No. But, correct. And the same is true for most people out there, if I had to guess. After all, who has the time or even the desire to investigate things such as these? To sift through the records, the documents, the data of every single company in existence, until they inevitably stumble onto us at every turn. Very few people indeed. And even if there are such people in the world, you'd be hard-pressed to find any among them who actually care. I would... what? Are you insane? Why would anybody not care upon finding out that a single company like Pandora owns every facet of their lives? It's actually rather startling how quickly you began accepting everything that comes out of Jasper's lips as fact. Though if you had to guess, it's probably even more startling that you never figured any of this out before today. Your doubts have only increased since the dragon first pointed out how Mary never told you about any of this. What in the world is she even doing? Is this yet another one of her attempts at shielding you from truths you have no reason to learn? Or did she too assume you were already aware of this nightmare you've apparently been living in your whole life? Whatever the case, it appears as though the dragon is hardly finished with his explanation. To put it simply, most people wouldn't care about Pandora being as dominant as it is for the same reasons that allowed us to reach this position to begin with. Namely, because we're convenient. Convenient? Instead of answering, Jasper motions at the plate before you, which you still haven't touched since it was first brought to your table. You should finish that meal now before our hosts start thinking that you don't like the food. It's not very polite to leave scraps behind either way. Not very polite? Either this is the CEO's way of trying to exert power over you, or he genuinely can't tell how invested, how unsettled you are by your conversation. As angry as you feel at his attempt at derailing you, you try your best to hide it behind a veil of insecurity. It'll probably be better received by the Drake than outright hostility. I don't think I'm hungry anymore. Perhaps. But for the sake of not causing a scene, I suggest you dispose of that food nonetheless. That, and lower your voice to acceptable levels. A foul look from the Drake is more than enough for your fake fear to quickly turn real. You honestly hadn't realized you'd begun shouting in the midst of your rant just now. You begin to pick apart your plate of whatever this is little by little, astounded by the Drake's inhuman composure. His ability to recount things so knittedly, in spite of how nightmarish they sound, is quite horrifying indeed. You're slowly losing your mind hearing him speak, yet his serious gaze remains the same as ever. It's actually almost as frightening as his explanation itself. Nonetheless, the food still tastes like nothing. Oh, for the love of... It tastes perfectly fine, I assure you. This is fine dining of the highest caliber, and all guests of this establishment agree to this fact. If you can't handle the food you're eating, the most likely explanation is that there's something wrong with your taste buds. That sounds kind of like gaslighting, not gonna lie. Jasper raises an eyebrow in disbelief at your witty remark, half spoken in jest. You're not sure whether it's because he thinks you said something very smart or very stupid. As funny as it is to see him in this state, you decide to nudge him forward, eager to see what more the dragon wishes to share with you. So, convenience. Care to explain what you mean by that one of these days? Well, it's a little bit of everything, really. Yes. Sashay slay, gaslight gatekeep girl boss. Yas. Yas queen. Lots of small things that add up in their whole. Like how you can watch every show you can think of on a video screen through a single account of Netflix. I'm sure that's far more manageable than making dozens of accounts on different service providers, correct? Or how you can have goods from all over the world delivered right by your doorstep within a matter of hours, instead of having to wait weeks or months. And of course, I don't need to mention things like smartphones or the internet even existing, do I? That's like way too many things at once. Is this yet another of your we do everything non-arguments? Oh please. Those were only 3 examples. I could make 1,000 more. My point is, most people enjoy when things are easy, approachable, comfortable. No, it's the modern day Apple! Wait, no, it's still Samsung, but with Apple views. Because let's face it, Samsung does like everything technology-wise. So, Samsung with Apple views. That shit's terrifying. Because, like, imagine a company... Actually, we don't even have to imagine it. We're kind of seeing it right now. But, like, imagine a company that can do as much as Samsung does. Imagine a company that can do as much as Disney does, and they have an Apple-esque view. Hey, yo, what's that? Oh, that's like listening only, okay. Now I got confused for a second. My point is, most people enjoy when things are easy, approachable, comfortable. And our job is to provide all these things and so much more. We give our customers all over the world exactly what they want, when and where they want it, and we don't give them reasons to stress about the details. That's why we became as influential as we did. That's why nobody minds in the slightest. So he says, and yet you find yourself minding an awful lot. Everything that comes out of his lips sounds like pure madness, and yet he speaks with the same tone of a teacher going through an average lesson at school. It's rather freaky, actually. Nonetheless, the more this goes on, the more things start to make sense. If Pandora truly does own everything, it would explain how Mary and Jasper could wreak havoc on your apartment complex the other day as nonchalantly as they did. Selena Inc. is nothing more than a front for their activities. Of course, being as rich and powerful as he claims would easily allow them to rack up the funding for the Synthetic Project now and the Cronus Project way back when. Even the FBI's interest in their affairs becomes a lot more understandable with all this new information. You're not sure whether to feel intrigued or repelled by the Drake's words as of this moment, but with all the evidence that surrounds you, you'd be hard-pressed not to believe them nonetheless. I guess it's just kind of hard to wrap my head around everything you've said. It's not every day that you find out, well, all this. Indeed. Frankly, I thought you'd have far less trouble internalizing all this than you actually did. Then again, I did also wrongly assume you'd already been made aware of most of it. Nonetheless, you can rest assured that Pandora is every bit as influential as I claimed it is. We even used to be the world government up until not that long ago. You were? That's not all that hard to believe considering everything you've heard so far. Don't act so surprised. I'm sure you've already wondered how come we were allowed to reach this level of influence to begin with by now. Well, that is true. I was meaning to inquire about that at some point. After all, shouldn't there be antitrust laws to protect against this kind of power consolidation? Even if there weren't, you're pretty sure that no government would have ever allowed them to become more powerful than them to begin with. Assuming Jasper doesn't tell you that governments never existed or some other dystopian nonsense along those lines. There were many such laws in the past, that is true. However, like all laws, they matter only to the extent that they were enforced. And we gave the authorities plenty of reasons not to enforce them. You mean, they were on your payroll? Correct. The people voted politicians into office to do their interests, and we paid them to do ours instead. To a certain extent, we still do. Don't get me wrong, there were some attempts at getting us out of the picture. In 2077, some congressmen brought forth a bill that included a strict $1 trillion roof on the share capital of every holding operating in the country. It would have effectively killed our business in the country, seeing as though our shares at the time were about 300 times that. 300 times? You really ought to stop sounding so surprised when you say stuff like that. I assume you're going to say that the draft was never made into law? That it didn't. It failed to make it past the Senate, where 56% of the members voted against it. You had that many people on your side? That's crazy. Of course not. That would have been unmanageable, even by our standards. We had 97% of the Senate on our side, and about the same number of people in the House as well. Pandora never leaves anything up to chance. We just made that fact a little less obvious this way. Well, so much for the democratic process still being anything like you were taught in school. This is beginning to sound more and more like one of those dystopian books you've studied in an English class by the minute. Give me a break. Next you'll tell me you own the media too. The Drake raises an eyebrow at your exclamation, wondering if you're serious about that. Oh, for the love of... Did Dr. Shelley never teach you to think before saying such foolishness out loud? First off, rude. And secondly, why wouldn't I jump to the conclusion that... No, wait a minute. Now that I think about it, it doesn't add up. If Pandora owns all the media, there's no way people would have such a jagged outlook on me even existing. There'd be positive coverage of Pandora and their synthetics up the wazoo. And yet, that's hardly the case. Half the world is still against you, and for reasons you can only half understand. That doesn't sound like something they'd allow given all the power they supposedly possess, if they could avoid it. Alright, fair. I guess it wouldn't make sense if you were the ones to manage the news. I suppose this means someone else does. Ah, and here I thought I'd need to explain this to you as well. Lucky me. But yes, it is as you said, we may be in charge of more things than I can count, but the news is one of the few we don't. As annoying as it is to admit, Mr. Algon and Miss Lightning aren't the only hard-headed people in the world. Another company way back when, Prometheus, also refused to work with us in any capacity. They saw what we were doing and decided they wanted a taste of the pie as well. They began amassing power in the media sector, pulling together news stations, internet companies, social networks, all under their banner. So they became you, only a lot smaller? An interesting way to put it, but yes, it is as you say. Their duties consist, summarily, in keeping their customers alert as to what's going on all over the world, as well as provide them the means to react, discuss, and even influence these events sometimes. To that end, they curate the experience of all their customers in order to ensure maximum engagement, in order to give everybody exactly what they want. I'm not sure I follow. Yeah. What does that have to do with the way people still look at me? Why is everyone still convinced that I'm gonna turn out to be the next Kronos? Okay, okay, so this Prometheus company, that's like Disney. No, AT&T. Okay, so Pandora is like a weird cross between Samsung, Apple, and Disney, whereas Prometheus is a weird cross between Disney and AT&T. It's all just weird as fuck. Jasper's eyes roll to the ceiling at your comment, evidently unamused. Well, you being the best candidate for the role certainly doesn't help. Yeah, right. And the objective answer is? A little snarky coming from you, but the Drake's practically asking for it at this point. The least he could do after bombarding you with all this unwanted information is to answer your question. They were just like, bye. Especially considering it's not even that far off from the current topic either. You honestly don't get it. Get it? The role isn't to just report the truth, it's to sell it to different people, all of which are looking for a unique spin on it. Regarding synthetic technology, for example, they sell pro-synthetic media to those who are pro-synthetic, and peddle the rest to those who aren't. They don't force anyone to watch it, mind you, much like how they don't force anyone to watch the news to begin with, but, much the same as they do with us, their customers simply don't care. They naturally gravitate towards content they agree with, and shy away from everything else. That's why so many people are convinced you'll turn up the same as Kronos, because they never needed any convincing in the first place, only reinforcing. That's messed up. How am I supposed to change these people's minds in these conditions? See, that's the interesting part. You can't. And you won't. Whether the media's machine ever starts spinning in your favor relies entirely on whether they can profit from it or not. It has nothing to do with either you or us can or will do. Well, that's just great. And you honestly can't do anything about it? Hardly. Like I said, Prometheus is its own company, and they need our infrastructure to operate as much as we need them to not go overboard with their reporting. This means they won't go to war with us by deliberately sicking the populace against us, but it also means we can't force them to spread alternative facts one way or another. You mean propaganda? Isn't that what you're asking me for? The Drake's words sting you more than you thought they would. You truly hadn't realized just what you were asking for until he stated it out loud. Of course you never wanted to use propaganda to convince everyone that you're still alive. No sane person ever would. But the fact that this conversation led you to believe that might even be possible, even if it isn't, is extremely concerning. Dear Diary, today I learned the whole world is owned by 2 massive megacorporations. Sounds like a great opener, don't you think? Jasper scoffs at your joke, evidently unamused with your cynicism. I don't see why you'd sound so glum when saying that. It's truly nowhere near as bad as you think it is. Nowhere near as... Are you kidding me? You just confessed that the free market is a myth, that our government is a farce, that me and everybody else out there has been living a lie their entire life. Do you have any idea how messed up everything you just said truly sounds? I do. And? Dragon's response is so curt and to the point, it almost sounds like a sucker punch to the gut. The way I see it, the world's working just as intended. Nobody's unemployed against their will. Nobody's waging wars over resources or other petty reasons. Nobody has any reason to go out into the streets and protest. Everybody's perfectly content with the way things are. So content, in fact, that they don't even bother trying to learn more about how this all became possible to begin with. Not even you. The dragon's ruthless comments force you to retreat into yourself once again, much like Bradbury's did just yesterday. It almost feels like being accused of committing a heinous crime. A crime you didn't even know you had committed until just now. And judging by the regret you're feeling, you're probably guilty of it too. You can make as many comments on the system as you wish. The fact of the matter is that it works, and that's all I'm concerned with. We provide food for the starving, electricity for the needy, medical care for the ill, and so much more. Thanks to us, nobody in the world is ever faced with a problem they cannot solve, a need they cannot fulfill. And though we ask for compensation for our services in both labor and currency, our prices are fair and our quality excellent. Nobody's ever complained. Nobody's ever noticed. Because there are no faults to complain about and no problems to notice. This is what we do. This is what people want. Deal with it. Silence. The sound of the wind outside the windows is all you can hear. That and your own thoughts plaguing your mind like a disease spurred on by the dragon's words. But soon enough, yet another voice adds itself to the endless chorus. You know, he has a point. The familiar voice comes from a nearby table, one you haven't looked at in quite a while. It's low and serious, and it crawls up your spine much the same as a serpent slithers amidst the grass. When you turn to look in its direction, you find a smirking Saint Bernard calmly sitting at that table, like a normal customer awaiting to be served, even though it's completely barren. His gaze is transfixed upon the two of you, almost as if delighting in the surprising confusion that his sudden arrival has caused. What are you doing here? And when did he even get here, for that matter? You definitely didn't hear him walk in, that's for sure. How long has he been observing the two of you for, exactly? Now, that's not how one's meant to greet others when in public, Isaac. It's impolite. Isn't that right, Mr. Morgan? The canine shifts his gaze to the drake sitting opposite you, as if gauging his reaction. Though Jasper's clearly annoyed at your blunt reaction as well, the main brunt of his aggression appears to be directed exclusively towards the unexpected guest, much to your relief. The android has a point, Bradbury. Your presence here is rather unexpected. So tell us what you're doing here before my mood begins to sour. Bradbury dodges Jasper's cold stare and threatening words with the finesse of a cheetah. My apologies. I had no idea you weren't having a great time. From over here, I honestly thought you were hitting it off quite nicely. But to answer your question, I just so happened to stumble upon this restaurant while on my late morning jog and decided to stop here for lunch. Completely on a whim, of course. We have a little thing for Bradbury that we used often with Sileo. Hey Bradbury, please take this to heart. This is for you.
Fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you.
Fuck you, Bradbury. Just leave. Completely on a whim, of course. He's gaslighting and possibly gatekeeping, but he's not girl bossing. Bullshit, you immediately think, amused with the canine's futile attempt at deception, judging from the look in Jasper's eyes. He's having very similar thoughts himself. Like I said, he's gaslighting us. He's gatekeeping us from this information, but he isn't girl bossing. You're not a girl boss, Bradbury. Please take this advice to heart, Bradbury. You're not a girl boss. You're never going to girl boss. So, shoo. Shoo. Bye. Bye. Bye-bye. Do I have access to the console? I do not have access to the console. But, leave. Leave. Right. So you just happened to stumble onto me and the android on the one occasion we decided to have lunch together. That is the gist of what I'm saying, yes. And you came to the one restaurant that's supposed to be closed to the general public right now? The canine lifts an eyebrow tiredly, and you're unsure whether that's because he doesn't have an answer or because he thinks the question's pointless in the first place. How did you even get here? I took the elevator, same as you did. You didn't think I'd take the stairs, did you? No offense, but we are more than 20 stories up, and my physique isn't quite the same as it once was. You don't even have time to question the veracity of Bradbury's explanation as the same skunk from earlier in the afternoon comes back to your table, a frantic expression on his face. Our sincerest apologies, sir. We have no idea how this man managed to sneak inside. Ha ha! The man looks at the CEO like a criminal fearing for his life. If he didn't look so uncomfortable, you'd almost find it pathetic. Fortunately, though the dragon appears quite upset at this unexpected development in your outing, he stops himself from unleashing it on the well-meaning waiter. Forget about that. Just make sure this doesn't happen again. Needless to say, the skunk is relieved to hear this. I understand, sir. We will fix this problem right away. No one else will trouble your meal moving forward. Right as he says so, you notice a pair of bulkier weasels approaching the table, wearing similar garments to the waiters. Though they wear sunglasses or what appear to be sunglasses, their harsh frowns and cracked fists make their intentions unmistakable. The skunk suddenly turns to face Bradbury. Speaking of, sir, I must kindly ask you to leave. The St. Bernard hardly reacts to the waiter's request and even pretends to take a sip from his empty glass to really drive the point home that he isn't moving. Hang on. Okay. Okay, so technically they're on private property. At the moment, Bradbury is trespassing, which is a misdemeanor. And technically he's there without permission, which, like I said, is trespassing, which means legally he can get which means, like, if this is like in current day times, like 2022, at least in the United States, I'm pretty sure he can legally get killed right now because it's private property. Although I'm not sure, can you kill someone for invading private property? No, they can't. Okay, can a misdemeanor because technically it's a federal job. Okay. It says here, as with many things that involve the government, the first question to ask is whether the issue is a federal, state, or local government issue. For employment with the federal government, it is generally assumed that no one will be hired if they have a criminal record. And technically, he does kind of have a criminal record right now. I could be wrong, and I'm probably wrong, but that's just what I know. With a heavy sigh, the skunk motions for the guards, and they calmly resume their walk towards the canine, only to abruptly stop at the Drake's command. No, he can stay. You're bewildered by what you just heard. So is the skunk and the two weasels, for that matter. Only Bradbury appears to smile at the Drake's orders, almost knowingly so. Are you sure, sir? Always. He can join our table, but he'll pay for his share of the meal on his own. The dog laughs at this notion. My, how rude, and here I thought you were a gentleman. Jasper's frowning intensifies ever so slightly at Bradbury's joke, but is otherwise unconcerned. He doesn't even flinch as the St. Bernard stands up and walks over to your table, bringing his chair with him. While the two security guards hardly react as they return to their post on the other side of the locale, the skunk appears more unsettled than ever. As you wish, sir. Though I must warn you, the kitchen's only cooking a full-course meal for 2 people now. It'll take a while for us to catch up to... It's alright. Now it's your turn to suddenly speak up, not wanting this conversation to drag on any longer. He could have my half of the meal. I'm not hungry anymore anyway. Not after everything you've heard, and especially not after seeing Bradbury here of all places. He can have your leftovers if he wishes. He can even choke on them for all you care. See, this is more like what I had in mind. You could learn quite a lot from your synthetic friend, Mr. Morgan. So I hear, Bradbury. So I hear. After some more time spent bantering and casting suspicious looks on one another, the waiters return to your table with 2 bowls of what looks like soup and assorted vegetables. You try to listen to the name of the dish for once, but you honestly can't pick up a word of what the skunk is saying. Half the sounds the waiter used seem like they'd been made up on the spot. Nonetheless, after yet more needless dish presentations, the men returned from whence they came, leaving the 3 of you alone once again. While the 2 men respectfully dig into their meals, you quietly turn to face the Drake sitting opposite you. Okay, but for real, are you sure this is alright? With Bradbury, I mean. Jasper raises an eyebrow at your query. You mean with letting him stay? You silently nod to him. You'd be lying if you said the St. Bernard's presence at the table wasn't making you at least somewhat uncomfortable just by itself. As fun as it would have been to see it happen, you don't just throw out the head of the FBI android. The repercussions simply aren't worth it. The what now? You have to do a double take upon hearing Jasper's title for the canine at your side. You suddenly turn towards the dog, a mixture of surprise, anger, and fear in your eyes. You didn't tell me you were the head of the FBI yesterday. Then immediately shift your gaze onto the Drake once more. And you didn't tell me that either. And neither did Mary, to be fair. But that's a discussion for another day, it would seem. Jasper reacts with nothing but nonchalance at her sudden outburst, as per usual, and the same can be said for Bradbury. I thought he'd already told you. And I thought it irrelevant at the time. It had nothing to do with why I came to your place after all. Unauthorized, might I add. The St. Bernard turns to look at you upon hearing the dragon's unfriendly remark, a confident smile on his lips and a playful tone in his voice. Goodness, what a man, am I right? I'm surprised you managed to last this long under that gaze of his. As friendly as the dog is trying to be with you, you're smart enough not to let yourself be fooled by this poor facade. His only interests lie with you. He made that abundantly clear yesterday. Instead of giving him what he wants, you take the opportunity to redirect the conversation away from yourself as much as you can. You two don't get along very well, do you? Bradbury raises an eyebrow at your question, almost curious. Really now, does anyone get along with him? Okay, that was a little funny. The annoyed look on Jasper's face most certainly is, at least. Alright, you made yourself clear. All jokes aside, can you really blame him? I mean, I am kind of his boss, and you are not my boss. The Drake's answer is curt and firm. The owners are. I answer to no one else. Certainly not to you. Now, you know that's not true. Sure, you might answer to the owners, but Pandora answers to the government. Been that way for quite a while, actually. After all, someone needs to regularly check that you don't accidentally try to nuke the whole world again. The St. Bernard's words are more than enough to unsettle you and the dragon both, albeit for clearly different reasons. It's not very hard to imagine just what he's referencing, after all. So yes, Mr. Morgan, in a way, you do answer to me, even if I try not to let it weigh on you too much. The Drake remains silent but defiant. He's clearly not in the mood to reply to Bradbury's taunts. Seeing as though he can't elicit a reaction from him, the FBI agent turns to face you instead. I don't think he appreciates it. Do you, Isaac? Alright, this is starting to get a little annoying, you reckon? Why are you talking to me like that? Stop it. I'm not your friend, even if you'd like me to be. You expected Bradbury to react harshly to your comments, and yet it doesn't look like he minds your passive aggressiveness all that much for whatever reason. Fair enough. I was just trying to act friendly, that's all. Someone here needs to balance out all that doom and gloom of Jasper's with some positivity after all, and from the looks of it, it's not going to be you. Well, he certainly nailed that last part alright. After everything you've learned just now with Jasper, you're in no mood for smiles or jokes. But you can't afford to indulge in these feelings right now. That's exactly what the St. Bernard wants you to do, if you had to guess. You need to divert his attention away from you as much as you can and hope that'll prevent him from finding out anything that he can use against you. Well, why don't you invite your synthetic friend over to lighten the mood then? I'm sure we'd all enjoy the extra pair of eyes on us at all times. You said you were in no mood for jokes, yet Bradbury pretends to laugh at your comments nonetheless. Ah, you're referring to Harlan. He is currently preoccupied with some ordinary maintenance back at our headquarters. Synthetic bodies are quite a fair bit more durable than organic ones, but they still need a little spa treatment every once in a while. You didn't say agent. Your sudden interruption is Bradbury raising an eyebrow once again, evidently annoyed. Pardon me? You didn't say Agent Harlan, just Harlan. You didn't use agent yesterday either, now that I think about it. You'd be lying if you said you didn't feel at least a little proud of yourself for spotting this little detail, even if you're not sure how much it even matters. Nonetheless, Bradbury clearly hesitated to call Harlan an FBI agent for a reason, and you might as well dig deeper into that now that you have the chance. Ah, that. Like I said yesterday, Harlan's circumstances are a little more complicated than yours. I'm aware. Mary told me all about them just a few hours ago. She talked about your little deal and how she has no idea who Harlan is even supposed to be. Instead of Bradbury's reaction, you're surprised to hear Jasper's quiet cackling coming from the other side of the table. Dr. Shelley? Telling you things? Color me shocked. Wow, what a jackass. Now it's your turn to sit silent and dumbfounded as your two companions take the piss on you. Those jerks. Finally, after some time spent laughing at your ignorance, Bradbury tries to change the subject. Now, let's not be mean to our synthetic friend, Mr. Morgan. He's not my friend. And just as it first appeared, Jasper's smirk dissipates into an angry frown. It doesn't upset you, of course. You're already well aware of the Drake's feelings towards you. It's just a little scary to see him shift like that all of a sudden, that's all. Of course. How could I forget? Anyways, I take it you're interested in learning more about Harlan? Perhaps it's because you're still a little shaken up, but you can feel all your bravado from earlier rapidly disappear. What's the point? You're probably not going to tell me anything anyway. It'd be weird for you to suddenly open up about this stuff with me when you clearly had no intention to do so with Mary. I have to say, I don't follow your logic in the slightest. Or share it for that matter. But you are correct in assuming that this is neither the time nor the place to recount the story. It's full of blood, gore, and all sorts of unsightly details. A tale entirely unsuitable for children, or the dinner table. And as much as I'd love to share it with you, I prefer keeping my lunch inside my stomach for the time being. Maybe another time. Odd. Aside from Bradbury's vain attempt at humor, the way he explained himself just now felt rather genuine. You're left confused as to whether he's fucking with you, or whether you simply can't accept him being truthful for a change. Yeah, but enough about me. I didn't mean to steal the show from you, gentlemen, I promise. Why don't you tell me more about what you're doing here? It's not every day that Pandora's CEO and one of their finest synthetics wind up dining at the same locale. Now that's a question, alright. And one you're not sure how to reply to. The owners of Pandora forced us to do this is the correct answer, but again, you're not sure whether being upfront about that with the St. Bernard is the optimal choice. Clearly, the Drake doesn't think so. No reason. I invited the synthetic merely for entertainment's sake. You could say we came here purely on a whim, same as you did. Now that's a nice way of using Bradbury's own lies against him, you have to admit. Jasper truly has a way with words. Bradbury seems to think the same. Entertainment, you say? Why, that's not very kind to our dear friend here now, is it? The last thing you want is for him to assume that, for crying out loud, he's not my... I know. Goodness, you can be so one-note sometimes. I'm just saying, behaving so rudely in front of your guest isn't going to do you any... Fuck. Don't even try. Your response is swift and cold, enough so to catch even the canine off guard. You don't get to make jokes like that. Not after what you did yesterday. After giving you a strange look, the St. Bernard erupts in an endless cackle. My, I had no idea the atmosphere around this table was so tense. Are these knives even necessary at this point? Whatever the two of you were discussing must have been really spicy. Again, you hesitate to look the man in the eyes, feeling almost ashamed of your earlier discussion with the dragon. We weren't discussing anything. I was just telling him more about my past and... Please. Jasper immediately interrupts you, a stern look in his eyes. Don't insult our guest with your poor acting, android. He's already aware of our past conversation. He wouldn't have approached if he hadn't heard enough already. That sounds just about like what you'd expected, indeed. You'd already figured out Bradbury hadn't come to the table just to have a hearty laugh at your expense. You just hoped you'd be able to delay this moment for as long as possible, and maybe even evade it. Unfortunately, that doesn't appear to be possible any longer. Even Bradbury seems surprised that you tried denying the truth for this long. I mean, let's be real. I did also comment on the way you ended that big speech of yours, if you haven't forgotten. My god, I swear to god I can't speak. If they're trying to make you feel stupid right now, they're most definitely succeeding. So, you've heard everything Jasper said. That I did. What of it? You try to organize your thoughts once more, not wanting to be taken by surprise by the canine again. If you have no choice but to have this talk right now, you might as well go out swinging from the get-go. Well, for starters, you can start by explaining why you didn't tell me any of this when we first met yesterday. Well, for starters, I had no idea of how much time I'd get to spend with you, so I had to choose my words carefully. Plus, like Jasper already said, I too thought you were already aware of most of this. He makes as if to continue with his spiel, but the Drake is quick to interrupt him, seemingly curious. While we're on the topic, what did you two discuss yesterday exactly? I thought you only went to the android's apartment to ask questions regarding an incident that occurred the night prior. Bradbury raises an eyebrow at his queries, seemingly unwilling to reply truthfully. Oh, we didn't do much. He wanted to know how much I knew about the synthetic project, for whatever reason. Again, you stunned both your companions with the swiftness of your response. He caught wind of how little time I had to choose to become one, and he wanted to know how I felt about the whole ordeal. Of course, that's only half the truth, if it could even be considered truth at all. You could go ahead and tell Jasper the full extent of Bradbury's actions yesterday and the depth of his suspicions, but you don't feel comfortable doing so just yet. For one, it's Jasper you're talking about, not Mary. You have no idea how he'd react, but you're pretty sure the consequences wouldn't be good for you either way. More importantly, keeping your options open is of the utmost importance. On the off chance Bradbury's right about Pandora hiding something, you don't want to make enemies of either them or the FBI until you know the full story. Well, make enemies of them more than they already are anyway. Luckily, Jasper's completely clueless as to your deception, or so it would seem. Is that so? Then pray tell, Bradbury, was it truly necessary to intrude on private property only to ask a few questions? Oh, you know me, Mr. Morgan. Knowing involves a great deal of my job, and knowing everything about your latest invention, well, even more so. Besides, I could also ask if it was truly necessary to bring Isaac all the way here only to spoon-feed him such trivial information on your company. The dragon appears to be quite troubled by the dog's choice of words for whatever reason, but he shows no discernible reaction other than that for the moment. While you wonder about that, the waiters finally bring in 2 prime cuts of steak that, for a change, look mostly edible. Nobody bothers to listen to the dish's introduction. Nobody even tries to eat it. You're not the only one fully invested in this conversation anymore. I'd hardly call anything I shared with the android trivial, Bradbury. I agree. Trivial isn't the right word for it. Frightening is way more accurate. At least, frightening to you. Neither the Drake nor the dog appear concerned by your fears at all, and instead look you from top to bottom with what appear to be annoyance and curiosity respectively. Like you're the weird one here and not them. It's actually kind of insulting. Why aren't you bothered by all this? Why am I the only one wary of Pandora owning everything and everyone? Shouldn't you be the one having this kind of reaction right now, knowing all this? Once again, the canine hardly budges before the weight of your accusations, unless you count that know-it-all smirk plastered on his face. Now, let's not jump to conclusions. I never said Pandora owning everything is a big deal. I swear to God, if Bradbury says now one more time, I'm going to make him go bye-bye. permanently. It's just nowhere near as crazy as you make it sound to be. You make as if to harshly reply, but stop yourself at the last moment. You've already done it before Jasper earlier in the conversation, and it only serves to make you look dumber in front of the CEO. It's become amply evident by now how unpopular your opinions on the matter are. You thought of all people Bradbury would have similar feelings to you, but that doesn't appear to be the case. In truth, everything is as Jasper said. Pandora is the only force in the world economy at this point in time, and they have been for the longest of times as well. In fact, they've become so prominent at this point, and their influence is so vast, it's simply impossible to imagine a world without them. At least, I imagine it would be for most people, if only they knew all these things. And none of this concerns you? It's upsetting. You don't know why, but this conversation, all this new information, is deeply upsetting. And seeing the canine recite it all as though it were a school essay only doubles the discomfort. Of course it concerns me. I'm FBI, remember? Everything Pandora does concerns me. You know what I'm trying to say? And so do I. You're surprised to hear Jasper's voice add itself to the mix, seeming just as, if not more annoyed than yours. His hands tighten into fists beneath the table as he turns to sternly address the FBI agent. We've wasted enough time with frivolities by now. Get to the damn point already. Even faced with Jasper's wrath, Bradbury's voice and attitude remain as unfazed as ever. The point? Jasper's fists collide with the table in a loud, undignified fashion. Just admit it, Bradbury. You didn't come all this way to have a pleasant conversation or whatever nonsense you were peddling to us at the start. I know how much you despise Pandora, how much you wish us all gone, how much you want to see us fail. And judging by his attitude, so does the android. That you do. The St. Bernard's feelings towards the Drake and his company are a mystery to no one at this point. You hardly have time to ponder about that further, however, as Jasper's tone becomes ever angrier and his voice ever louder. You just came here to gloat, didn't you? To try and use my discussion with the android as a tool to deviate him against his makers. Isn't that right? Well, go on. Make your little speech about how we're the worst thing to ever happen to the world. It's the least you can do after wasting all my precious time. I'm listening. Silence. Once again, the room's filled with nothing but silence. Perhaps to the dragon this is a victory sign, that his accusations have found their mark, like arrows perfectly striking their target. But you know better. You've seen that look on the canine's face more than enough already, and felt the weight of his stare more often than you would have liked. He is not affected. He is not bothered, and he's only getting started. You seem to have greatly mistaken me. Just where did you get this impression of me, if I might ask? You knew something was coming. Some sort of response that would have shut both you and your companion down like smartphones without battery. But you were not expecting that. But you... Come on now. I didn't say everything is as Jasper said for show, you know. I agree with his belief that no one would bat an eye if only they knew how much they depended on Pandora for their livelihood. You need only look at those waiters over there. They can clearly tell that we're discussing strange things over here, yet they make no effort to try and listen in. Out of all the things Bradbury could have done, agreeing with Jasper on all his points was probably at the bottom of the list. His fake friendliness from earlier has mellowed out considerably all of a sudden, and now he speaks with a calm yet serious tone that almost feels genuine. It's stunning, to say the least. That's only because those people are just trying to do their job, though, isn't it? Precisely. Much the same as everyone else is simply trying to live their life. You're immediately reminded of something the Drake said much earlier in the conversation. Who has the time or will to look any of this up? Bingo. It's quite disconcerting. You should be focusing on a number of different things right now, half of which related to the St. Bernard's sudden change of attitude. Yet all that concerns you right now are all these new bits of information and the unexpected way the dog is presenting them to you. Evidently, you are not alone in your disbelief. And you really have no qualms about everyone depending on Pandora either? Sounds quite hard to believe, given your role is to keep us in line. More or less. I mean, you said it best yourself, didn't you? You provided food for the hungry, medical care for the needy, and, well, a whole slew of other things, I assume. You know what I mean. The good Pandora does to this world simply by existing cannot be overstated. Maybe this is what's really bothering you about this entire discussion. How quickly one revelation leads into the next. How seamlessly the logic in the canine's arguments flow. How easily you can bring yourself to believe these assertions. And most importantly, how much sense it's all starting to make the more you hear about all this. But still, doesn't it bother you in the least that a single company is responsible for all this? Why should it? How's that any different from a bunch of different companies providing all the goods and services in the economy instead? In the end, most people don't mind who they give their money to, so long as they get what they're seeking in return. When all you care about is leading a quiet, fulfilling life, the name of the company you need to thank for this opportunity is wholly unimportant. Some would even argue that concentrating all the power in one business's hands prevents feudal power struggles between corporate overlords, and increases efficiency. So long as the company doesn't get lazy anyway. It's so quick you almost fail to notice it. The glint in Bradbury's smirk which resurfaced for just a moment underneath his otherwise normal-looking smile. It tells you that he's still hiding something, despite how candid he appears. You still haven't answered your own question, Bradbury. You look straight into the canine's eyes, a defiant glint in your own. You asked, how's that any different from a bunch of companies doing the same thing instead? In this scenario, one company failing wouldn't hurt the system too much. The others would be able to take over and balance would be restored. But in our reality, if Pandora were to fall, everything and everyone who depend on them would collapse as well. How come you didn't realize this sooner? Why did putting into words what troubled you with this revelation take this long to accomplish? And why are Bradbury's lips curling once more into that malevolent, all-knowing smirk? See, this is what I was talking about yesterday. You truly are so much smarter than you give yourself credit for, Isaac. Indeed, imagine what would happen should Pandora suddenly leave the scene, shall we say. You need a little time to articulate your thoughts on the matter, to truly understand the consequences such a catastrophe would bring. You haven't studied much economics at school, but you're thankful for what little you did. You'd be totally clueless right now otherwise. Well, with no funding and no incoming orders, most businesses would stop operating. And with no goods, no services, and no jobs, the entire world economy would freeze overnight. Bradbury appears mostly satisfied with your answer. A very generic description, but mostly correct. Everyone would panic, the institutions would stop working, and the world would fall into chaos. Truly, it'd be hell on earth like we've never seen before. His musings are suddenly interrupted by a familiar slam on the table, coming from Jasper's side of the table. You haven't looked his way at all since Bradbury began his explanation, but his anger's clearly risen in the time since. Oh, give me a break. You're talking of the apocalypse as though it's right next door. There has never been a crisis of this magnitude in history, even before Pandora took control, and especially after we did. You're just trying to scare that android into thinking things your way. I'm doing no such thing, I assure you. Isaac figured all this out all on his own, with no meddling on my behalf. Besides, the only reason why nothing of this magnitude's ever happened before is because of all the necessary conditions weren't in place yet. The conditions? The dog's smile returns as he turns to face you once again. Before Pandora took over, when a sector or a country would collapse, other businesses or countries would pick up the slack. Because power was divided among many, so was the risk, and systemic problems were much easier to sort out. But now, all that power, all that risk is focused in the hands of a select group of people, and it falls to them to ensure that the entire system, the entire world, keeps running as usual. The whole world goes quiet for a moment as reality begins to settle in your mind. So that's it, huh? That's the state of the world we're living in? It's awful! There's no other way to describe it. In less than an hour, everything you thought you knew your entire life was turned on its head, and all you're left with in its passing is fear and anger. But what truly bothers you is that you're alone. That you're the only one who laments the loss of simplicity and fairness in your old reality seemed to have. For the first time in a long while, you truly feel like a fool. Pandora, I am aware of the responsibility I bear. Jasper makes as if to speak up once again, looking more stalwart and composed than ever, seemingly unfazed by everything the canine said. His gaze is as stern as his grandfather's as he crosses his arms, looking more and more like one of the busts you saw earlier in the meeting room room at Pandora's HQ. My job is as you describe it, to keep the entire world running, to coordinate every inch of this business and steer it towards our desired outcome, to preserve this world and all the people in it, to keep things running smoothly as they always have, to keep people happy as they deserve to be. You don't know what to think at this point, honestly. As much as the Drake's trying to cover up for the flaws Bradbury highlighted earlier, he fails to address any of the points that make you upset. Bradbury definitely shouldn't be in a position of power. As much as the Drake's trying to cover up for the flaws Bradbury highlighted earlier, he fails to address any of the points that make you upset. It feels like grandstanding. Pointless, uninspiring, disingenuous grandstanding. And clearly, you're not the only one to think so. Bravo! What a wonderful speech. Pray tell, was this always the case, or did your motivations change across the ages? I always wondered if the people who developed Kronos were also inspired by such selfless altruism. And here we are again, talking about the same topics as always. Disgusting. Kronos was a mistake, a foolish attempt to innovate where there was no need, to fix what was never broken. That abomination of science taught us a valuable lesson, a lesson I intend to treasure for as long as I'm CEO. As long as I'm in charge of this company, the world will not fear another monster like him ever again. If everything the dog and dragon brought up so far felt like getting stabbed with a knife, this final argument was them twisting it in the wound. Especially that abomination of science part. A title you recall Jasper using not even that long ago. A title he used to describe you. Hiya! Okay. Alrighty. And from there, it's not that difficult to put two and two together, and realize this entire speech of his was all about you. And though all you can think of right now is how much you wish you could cry, the St. Bernard can do nothing but laugh. As long as you're in charge, you say. Don't get me wrong, Mr. Morgan. I hold you in the highest regards. I am in awe of your dedication, of your commitment to your duties. Everyone does. Everyone does hate Isaac. But we both know not everyone in the world is like you, don't we? Not everyone is so outstanding. Not everyone is so well-meaning. What do you say would happen if there was anyone else in your position right now? Like Isaac here, or Dr. Shelley, or any of your subordinates for that matter. Would they share your same sense of responsibility? Your same level of care in everything you do? Oh, I actually have something that might help Isaac. Let me see if I can find it. I know it's around here somewhere. Oh, here it is. There we go. Don't worry, Isaac, you're getting some love. Or would they disregard these things and do things their own way? The wrong way, I should say. Bradbury's malicious words are like a spell, chilling the air around the table like an icy wind only seldomly interrupted by the dog's own laugh. Yo, what the fuck is going on with Bradbury? What the fuck is going on with him? Like, his eyes, he's doing that. He's got demon eyes. And I can see the irises wiggling. They're wiggling. Nah. In the end, it won't be a crisis to end Pandora. It won't be inflation or market crash, a natural disaster, or even a war. All you need is the wrong man in the right place at the right time, and everything and everyone will vanish in the blink of an eye. All we can ponder really is when it'll happen. The sudden scraping of Jasper's chair against the floor as he quickly stands up frightens you more than a jump scare in a horror movie. Only a single vein is visible on his forehead as he turns to address you, his stern tone only barely concealing the sheer volume of the fury he's hiding beneath. We're done here. I'm sorry. I said we're done here. The dragon is oblivious to you still needing time to process everything that just occurred. And for just a moment, so are you. Stand up. You do so right away, unquestioningly, like an automaton heeding its master's command. All you can think about is the quickened beat of your synthetic heart in your chest. When the drake turns and begins to head towards the exit, he doesn't need to shout for you to follow suit right away. You hear the canine's playful voice echo behind you as you leave. You're not even going to wait for the desserts to come out? They smell... I don't care. The dragon's response is so quick and to the point. I'm not hungry anymore. As you pass by the head waiter on the way to the door, Jasper swiftly pulls him in by means of his necktie. You saw nothing. You heard nothing. Keep it that way. He's almost choking the old skunk by how hard he's tugging on his tie, yet the man tries his best to appear unbothered nonetheless. His best, unfortunately, is not nearly enough. Indeed, sir. Nothing out of the ordinary happened, and no one will ever suspect otherwise. His frantic tone is all the confirmation the drake needs, and the CEO swiftly releases him. The waiter needs some time to catch his breath as the drake heads towards the elevator, his every step echoing in the room behind him. As you rush to follow him, you turn your gaze a final time towards the concerned waiters who have appeared on the scene to look after their shocked colleague. Thank you for the meal. Have a good day. Though your mind is completely fried at present, it seems you haven't forgotten how to be polite, if nothing else. Though your thoughtfulness rings hollow, now more than ever. Hollow indeed. Much like the waiter's own voice is ever silent and unresponsive as you hastily exit the restaurant. We're gonna leave off here tonight. Oh my god, the temptation to just... We're almost there. Oh, what's that? Bullet dodged. What do you mean? Like, are we, like, close to the end of the visual novel? Like, if we can get a time estimate, it'll decide whether or not we continue right now or just leave off. End of what is most of it. What? Because I really don't want to have another repeat of Heart of Amethyst part. Okay. In that case, like I said, I am like half tempted to just like hop off and then hop immediately back on and read Yes Less Past. Actually, you know what? Fuck it, I'm gonna do that. Stick around if you want to see Yes Less Past. If not, then stay safe, have a good night, and I will see you tomorrow. And like I said, also the Uru counter is 0, and stick around if you want to see that.